we never change course. We are moving forward. There are no whiplashes that we always had and stop and they go the other direction. Doesn't exist in California.
The state that never moves backwards, proclaimed Arnold Schwarzenegger in 2019 as he celebrated our 1 millionth solar installation. What began as his moonshot proclamation in 2005 became reality just 14 years later. The State Assembly apparently missed that event. They just voted to take solar policy back 20 years. Breaking news! The California Senate just reversed course on Assembly Bill 942 and removed the language which would have canceled 2 million solar contracts as the California solar coaster ride continues. I'm Billy B, and it's all straight ahead on this episode of Unplugged California. The cornerstone of solar policy over the past 20 years is the concept of net energy metering. Now, until recently, the utilities by law were required to credit every kilowatt of solar energy sent to the grid at the same rate they would otherwise charge. It was and is a 20-year contract and is transferable to new owners when the home is sold. But that all changed in 2023 when the Newsom-appointed CPUC sided with the state's utilities and removed net metering for all new solar customers. With NEM 3, the average rate paid for solar kilowatts is now about 20 to 25 cents on the dollar. Solar installations, not surprisingly, plummeted in California. Several large companies went bankrupt. Thousands of jobs were lost. And new customers now require more costly battery storage plus solar to avoid losing money. No problem for pre-23 customers, right? Wrong. A recent bill, AB 942, just passed the State House and is now moving through the Senate. Thanks to bipartisan leadership in the Senate Energy Committee and under pressure from more than 100 consumer rights groups, including the Solar Rights Alliance, the solar contracts for 2 million existing customers are protected, at least for now. Our next guest is Dave Rosenfeld, Executive Director of the Solar Rights Alliance. Dave was there from the beginning of California's solar revolution and more than 20 years ago predicted the response.
I was involved in the effort to convince Governor Schwarzenegger to go big on solar back in the early aughts. And when that happened, there was a bunch of us who were sitting around and going like, wow, there's going to be 1 million people that have solar in like 10 or 15 years. The utilities are definitely going to go after this. We're going to need to organize the consumers.
The contract between California and their 2 million solar constituents dates back more than a decade.
This actually all goes back 15 years ago when Jerry Brown, back in I think it was 2013, said to the CPUC, we need to lock in and formalize the agreement that we have with solar customers to guarantee that when they sign up for solar, that they could stay on their net metering program for 20 years, which is the lifetime of their solar system. The CPUC went and formalized that in 2014. They reaffirmed that in 2016. They reaffirmed it again in 2022. And so for all this time now, 2 million consumers, when they signed up for solar with PG&E, Edison, or San Diego Gas and Electric, they signed a contract. The PG&E contract literally says this is a legally binding contract that guarantees that they can stay on their NEM 1 or NEM 2 program for 20 years, even if they sell their home, that system can stay on a NEM for the new homeowner.
Who are the heroes and villains in this solar passion play? And why do they take their respective sides?
The CPUC has been rubber stamping rate hike after rate hike after rate hike. Gavin Newsom's CPUC has been especially rubber stamping all this stuff. And now we have an electricity crisis. And the politicians feel like, oh, I got to do something about that. So Gavin Newsom issues an executive order that rather than actually going after the root of the problem, which is utility overspending on poles and wires and lax regulation and looking the other way, went and just pointed the finger and scapegoated rooftop solar customers and said, I think this is the problem. So CPUC, give me a list of solutions for how to solve the problem. So consumers are the heroes. The voters are the heroes thus far. The villain is always the utilities. It always comes back to the monopoly utilities and the amount of power and influence that they have.
Dave explains that utilities and unions are singing out of the same anti-rooftop solar hymnal.
They say literally like spray money at every level of society to either buy loyalty, goodwill, or silence. And that's the backdrop, right? Like, just remember that kind of thing. And when I say utilities, I'm talking about PG&E, Edison, and San Diego Gas and Electric. But importantly, I am also talking about their union, the IBEW. You've got to look at that because they are absolutely like tied at the hip with the utilities when it comes to this agenda to kill off rooftop solar.
One of the long-held views among state regulators is that solar customers shift the higher cost of electricity to non-solar customers. The cornerstone of their research is backed by the UC Berkeley Haas Institute and a cost shift study ultimately signed off by Department Chair Severin Bornstein, which Dave feels is based on fuzzy math.
You can always find a scientist with a real degree at a real university that will say that's not true. And in fact, global warming is caused by something natural. And in the case of Severin Bornstein at UC Berkeley, first off, his institute, the Haas Institute, took $250,000 from the utilities. So that's one thing. Also, the guy has been against rooftop solar since rooftop solar has been around in California. So he's got a point of view. We know what it is. Third, he's a political appointee. He's the head of CAISO. So like the idea that he's weighing in on this kind of stuff is completely inappropriate. Meanwhile, you have a dozen energy experts who have just as much, if not more, of a distinguished career and know better about this stuff, including the former head of FERC. You have one of the chief principals at the Brattle Group who actually worked for the utilities for his entire career before he retired. So he knows a thing or two about how the whole thing works. You have Mark Jacobson at Stanford University who are saying this is nonsense. So you have that, right? And then we can dig into like how Bornstein and other people who are proponents of the cost shift, how they actually calculate their numbers. And it's like it's a mess. So let me just give you one example of that. Is baked into the assumption of this cost shift. One of the things they do is they count the electricity that you make from your solar panels that you then consume inside your house. This is called self-consumption. And they count that every electron that you make yourself and then consume, you're shifting a cost on to other customers because you didn't buy the utilities electricity. So let me just put that, for those of you who don't have solar, what that means is it's the same thing as saying, if I go and I turn off my lights, and thus I don't buy electricity from the utility, I'm responsible for increasing electricity bills on my neighbor. It's like saying if I hang dry my clothing and don't run my clothes dryer, I am increasing electricity costs. It's the same thing. That's how crazy these people are, is that they literally think that you are obligated to buy every little bit of electricity from the utility at max velocity. In fact, if you sell your house and you move, you're causing a cost shift on your neighbors because you're not buying from PG&E. So the mentality that's built into these cost shift assumptions is literally that you're a prisoner of the utility. And like, we're just like, that's whacked. Like, there is no way that should be making it into any kind of study, let alone be the basis of state policy making.
Rather than causing an expense to non-solar customers, Dave explains that solar actually reduces the impact of energy infrastructure and therefore actually reduces the cost of electricity to California consumers.
When you put solar panels on your roof, you are reducing your burden on public infrastructure. That's the premise behind why there's an exemption in increasing your property taxes for doing that, even though it might increase the value of your home. And that's a very reasonable thing. We should be encouraging people to reduce their burden on society. And this is one of the things to do. And the direction that Gavin Newsom's state of California is going these days is discouraging people from reducing their burden on society, which of course, in the case of the electricity system, benefits PG&E and then screws everybody else. And so we're pushing to remind our lawmakers and the public the direction we ought to go in is the one that we've been going in, which is encouraging people to reduce their burden on society. That's a good thing. We want that to happen.
To learn more, sign up or donate, please contact the Solar Rights Alliance and help them continue the great work that they're doing to protect rooftop solar. And be sure to like and subscribe here for more news and views that shape California energy and your life. For Unplugged California, I'm Billy B. Thanks for watching.